Imagine walking to the market on a normal afternoon, and then surprise the sun just vanishes. No one explained eclipses back then, so of course people assumed the universe was angry. And honestly, wouldn't you?
Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. Dim the lights, get cozy, and imagine the sky going dark in the middle of the day. Not a storm, not clouds, not evening creeping in, but an eerie, unnatural darkness. People of the past didn't have explanations like physics or astronomy. To them, it wasn't just a strange phenomenon, it was a warning, a sign, maybe even the end of the world. Today, we'll drift back through history to explore one of the most mysterious days ever recorded, when the sun seemingly stopped shining. And as always, we'll float gently through the story with a touch of dry humor. Because yes, history can be sleepy and strangely fascinating at the same time. Let's start with what might have actually happened. In the records, some ancient civilizations described a day when the sun disappeared, plunging everything into darkness. One example comes from the Bible, in the book of Joshua, where it is famously written that the sun stood still during a battle so Joshua could finish defeating his enemies. Dramatic, right? Imagine being a soldier, mid-swing with your sword, and suddenly noticing that the shadows aren't moving. Convenient too, because apparently God paused the earth just to help. Modern science, of course, has some slightly less theatrical explanations. Many historians and astronomers think this sun stopping might have been a total solar eclipse. During an eclipse, the moon passes directly between Earth and the sun, turning day into night for a brief period. For ancient people without clocks or scientific instruments, this would have been terrifying. The birds stop singing, the animals get confused, and the sky turns an almost unnatural twilight. If you lived in 1200 BCE and suddenly couldn't see your hands in front of your face, you probably assumed the universe was upset. But that's just one example. There are multiple reports of unusual darkening events throughout history. The Romans recorded strange phenomena in 44 BCE, around the time of Julius Caesar's assassination. Ancient Chinese astronomers noted that in certain years, the sun faded or turned black for hours. And in medieval Europe, chroniclers often described days when the light failed, crops suffered, and people prayed a lot. Now, what made these days so memorable wasn't just the darkness itself, it was the effect on human behavior. Societies interpreted these events as omens, divine warnings, or punishments. Leaders would declare fasts, armies would hesitate, and entire cities could descend into panic. One day of darkness could reshape decisions, influence battles, or even accelerate political change. In a world without scientific reasoning, sunlight was survival, so when it vanished, so did certainty. Take for instance the eclipse of 585 BCE. Greek historians recorded that during a battle between the Medes and the Lydians, a sudden darkness fell, startling both armies into a ceasefire. According to Herodotus, both sides assumed that the gods were angry and agreed to stop fighting. It's hard to imagine modern generals pausing mid-battle to check their weather apps, but back then, it worked. One day of darkness literally altered the course of history. And then there's the medieval angle. Chroniclers in Europe, observing strange smoke in the skies possibly caused by volcanic eruptions, wrote about the sky turning dark for weeks. Trees, crops, and livestock suffered. People panicked. Some thought it was the end times. Others blamed themselves, thinking their sins had caused the sun to vanish. Entire civilizations could interpret these events as moral or divine warnings, even though, in reality, it was just Earth being Earth. Of course, not all of these dark days were caused by eclipses. Volcanic eruptions were a major culprit. Massive eruptions spew ash into the atmosphere, sometimes blotting out the sun for days, months, or even years. The 536 CE volcanic event is famous for causing a global darkening. Contemporary records describe sunlight being dimmed for months, temperatures dropping, crops failing, and famine spreading across Europe and Asia. People described a year without proper sunlight, and for historians, this period is considered one of the darkest in human history literally. What's fascinating is how humans adapt their narratives to these events. Eclipses are brief, predictable, and eventually explainable, but when darkness persists, stories grow taller. Chronicles describe famine, wars, and migrations, all blamed on the sun's failure. Leaders sometimes claim divine authority to act, imposing new rules or collecting taxes to appease unseen forces. And all of this came from nature, just doing its thing, ash clouds, orbital mechanics, and tectonic eruptions with zero malice intended. Floating over to another mysterious day, there are reports from the Middle Ages of black suns in Europe. Chroniclers described streets in broad daylight plunged into twilight, markets halted, church bells rang for prayer, and superstition ran rampant. In these societies, the sun was both a practical guide and a symbol of divine favor. Its temporary disappearance wasn't just inconvenient, it questioned the entire social order. People didn't know what else to do except observe, pray, and hope the world would turn right side up again. Astronomers today have tried to match historical accounts with astronomical calculations. Some events align perfectly with solar eclipses, others with volcanic aerosols, and a few remain mysterious. That lingering uncertainty is part of the fascination. Historians can chart orbital mechanics and ash clouds, but they cannot fully recreate the psychological impact on people who thought the sun itself had died. It's also important to note how these dark days affected culture. Myths, legends, and religious practices evolved around them. Gods of the sun, sky, and light were often appeased. Temples were built or repaired, and rituals developed that combined reverence with caution. The disappearance of the sun became a story repeated across generations, not just a scientific anomaly, but a symbolic touchstone for humanity's fragility and awe in the face of the natural world. Meanwhile, in civilizations far from Europe and the Near East, similar events were interpreted in parallel ways. The Chinese meticulously recorded eclipses, often linking them to dynastic fortunes or predicting political outcomes. The Maya developed sophisticated astronomical calculations to predict eclipses centuries in advance, perhaps partly because they remembered the chaos caused by sudden darkness. Even in remote regions, the same human instinct prevailed, to read meaning into the sky when it changed. So what can we take from these episodes if we let ourselves drift into history slowly, as you might drift into sleep? For one, humans have always been creatures of habit, guided by the sun, the seasons, and the rhythm of light. Interrupt that rhythm, and even the most structured society can wobble. For another, the interpretations people build around natural phenomena shape decisions, history, and culture. Wars can be paused, leaders can rise or fall, civilizations can pivot all because of an eclipse, a cloud of ash, or a rare celestial alignment. And finally, these dark days remind us of our smallness in the universe. Modern technology and science have demystified most of these events. We can predict eclipses to the second, measure volcanic ash across continents, and understand solar behavior. But for people living in 585 BCE, 536 CE, or the Middle Ages, the sudden loss of sunlight was terrifying, inexplicable, and monumental. Tonight, as you drift off, picture the sun dimming above your own world. Imagine streets quiet, animals uneasy, and people looking upward wondering what they did to deserve such a fate. Then imagine the sunlight returning, slowly as it always does, and civilization continuing on, because that's what humans do. We adapt, we interpret, and we endure. The darkest days in history weren't just curiosities or scientific events. They were pivotal experiences that shaped thought, belief, and human behavior, and they remain, even today, a reminder of how fragile and awe-inspiring our world really is.